YouTube has a plagiarism problem.
I've had lots of people plagiarize my content.
There's a fine line between inspiration and plagiarism.
I think it's something we have to keep an eye on because it could get very bad very quickly.
And perhaps it's best amplified by OBF, who has gained notoriety off the back of plagiarizing other channels. And yes, that is channels plural.
In the YouTube space, there's this one big, glaring, frustrating piece of plagiarism that's really stuck out. You know, the guy OBS.
For example, of like OBF.
Perhaps you saw this video in October 2020 by Vox called Why American Public Transit is So Bad. Or perhaps this one in November 2021 called Why America is Terribly Designed by OBF. Maybe you even saw both with a weird sense of deja vu.
This is a system that's really good at moving people between the suburbs.
And Vox wasn't the only ones that he's done it to. From Johnny Harris to Not Just Bikes to Neo to us. He's definitely Control-C, Control-V'd a good few creators. Now, sometimes on YouTube, there is a crossover of ideas. Similar videos on similar topics might be released around the same time for no other reason than a coincidence. We've even had this happen before. It's just part of being an educational channel. But sometimes things just get a bit too similar. And even if not word for word, sometimes things seem just a bit too copy and paste. Such has been the case with OBF. But OBF is not just an isolated problem. Today, I not only want to show the extent of his plagiarism, but also show how OBF is representative of a bigger, ever-growing problem on the educational side of YouTube. The very first video we uploaded on this channel was titled Why the US Has Never Been Invaded. And this isn't a topic that's particularly unique or untackled on YouTube. I mean, our video even drew a lot of inspiration from other work and research. Actually, in fact, specifically the opening chapter of Tim Marshall's Prisoners of Geography, which you should absolutely read if you get a chance. To use a more YouTube-based example, we just happened to recently release a video on the US water shortage, the same week that Vox did. We both covered a similar subject, independently of each other with unique takes, angles, and presentational styles. But both channels were clearly inspired by the events that are happening on the West to tell this story. Inspiration is not plagiarism, and neither is quoting something word for word with proper permissions and citings. OBF, though, is a different can of worms. Check out the thumbnail that we released with the Why America Will Never Be Invaded video. Now, place it next to OBF's recent video on a very similar subject, you can probably see where I'm going with this. But this brings up an interesting point. Sometimes it can seem like plagiarism with very similar thumbnails, but now let's also watch a short segment from each video. The deserts to the southwest, the Rocky and Appalachian Mountains, and the vast icy regions of Alaska are all incredible geographic aids to the potential American defense. Even if we move inland, much of the United States has incredible water access.
What's impressive about the US's geography is how challenging it makes the US to conquer, and that might have to do with the diversity of terrains like deserts, swamps, and mountains. The Appalachian Mountains in the east and the Rocky Mountains in the west serve as major barriers to inland invasion, and the Great Lakes in the northeast.
Nothing here is copied word for word, and these are factual videos. There is only a certain number of ways you can display information. So I'll put the question to you. Do you think that this is plagiarism, or perhaps just two channels sharing very specific facts on a similar topic? I personally say it's the second option, but given OBF's similar thumbnail and track record, he might just be getting better at blurring the lines of plagiarism. The point here isn't to cause drama, the point is to point out concerns with the practices of channels such as OBF. Earlier on, we mentioned Vox, and OBF straight-up copying was highlighted on Twitter by Neo.
This is a map of Chicago's train system.
If you look at its design, it's not very hard to figure out what it was built to do. All its different lines intersect here in Chicago's downtown, and then fan outward. This is a system that's really good at moving people between the suburbs or the outer rings of the city and then downtown.
That's like direct copy-paste. Retweeting that was popular YouTuber Not Just Bikes, who had also been plagiarized by OBF in the exact same video, and who went as far as to issue a copyright takedown of the video. A lot of what I just mentioned has actually been covered in more depth on YouTube before, in a really good deep dive done by Alan Fisher, which you should also check out at some point. To summarize Alan's main point, when you combine other people's arguments instead of researching and formulating your own, it can lead you to faulty conclusions. Another point Fisher made in his video is that he came away from his own research feeling disappointed, not just in OBF as a fellow creator, but especially as one who clearly has incredible skill and talent in animation, and who is also quite well spoken. And this is a sentiment that we absolutely share. His videos are beautiful. As somebody who does a lot of animation on our videos, I can see how much time and effort he puts into making those videos look so great. But looking at OBF and his known issues, we got thinking, and by we, I mean myself, writers Jamie and Aparna, got together and started thinking about how big is the issue of plagiarism on YouTube itself.
I've noticed a lot of channels, whether in gaming channels like The Gamer or in education with channels like someone called Kleos. A lot of these videos that are very similar to other people's content, it's very clearly mass produced. In some cases, they don't even have a person narrating. It's like a Microsoft Sam-esque voice.
It goes in a straight line along Sheikh Zayed Road, Dubai's main highway.
Even between, say, OBF and this Kleos channel, they both have videos with similar thumbnails called Why Singapore is Insanely Well Designed. And so, yeah, I think there is a problem there, either with plagiarism or at very least with channels putting out similar content and not wanting to put in the work to differentiate that from other content.
This is a thing. This is becoming a thing, if it wasn't a thing already, to just rip off other educational creators. I think one of the things that makes educational videos kind of ripe for this kind of rip off is that they're factual videos, right? They're about a factual topic, and it's a lot harder to rip off somebody's vlog, right? I mean, you can't be them. So I think just the fact that most of these videos are factual and just have a topic that they cover, it's ripe for plagiarism.
A lot of this comes down to how copyright law exists and how they are or even not upheld. Many creators will talk about fair use specifically. While similar doctrines exist worldwide, the American version of fair use is what's important here, as YouTube itself is an American platform. As I am obviously not a lawyer, let's have a look at a quote from the Copyright and Fair Use section of the Stanford University Library's website. According to Stanford, in its most general sense, a fair use is any copying of copyrighted material done for a limited and transformative purpose, such as to comment upon and criticize or parody a copyrighted work. Such use can be done without permission from the copyrighted owner. In other words, fair use is a defense against a claim of copyright infringement. If your use qualifies as fair use in court, then it would not be considered infringement. The key word here is transformative. To be valid, a piece must sustainably do something different from the original work to fall under fair use. However, platforms such as YouTube overwhelmingly use algorithms to do the heavy lifting of policing content, even if they're debatably transformative. Where things get blurry is in regards to plagiarism. In the previous Vox example, OBF was saying the same words and using an incredibly similar animation style to the Vox piece. It was a pretty blatant copy. However, this is the internet, and some people can and have argued that, well, isn't OBF in the clear just by the sheer fact that it's his own voice with his own animations, even if it is incredibly similar. One positive change YouTube has made over the past few years is to give creators the ability to search for copyright matches to their own content, and even use it for takedowns. However, this tool does have its limits. It only works with exact or near exact content matches, to such a point where it's mostly only useful in blatant content theft cases. Still, this is hugely important, especially now as we've seen a huge growth in the creator economy. It is at the very least an attempt to put some amount of copyright power in the hands of creators. And perhaps its limited scope comes from worries about the tool being abused. And I think giving creators access to these tools is good. Other platforms like Instagram and TikTok have made the ability to replicate content vastly easier over time. This has even led to a growth of content farms, which are huge companies that hire young creators, often at nearly minimum wage rates, to pump out huge amounts of content. At first, that's what we thought OBF was, and soon discovered that it is just one guy. One thing I'd like to come back to from earlier is the difference between inspiration and plagiarism. And perhaps surprisingly, even despite the weird complexities of copyright law, creators can often use it to their advantage.
The original purpose of copyright is so that people will not be discouraged from making new art because someone just rips it off, right? So an example of that is that I do go out and I film most of my own content, or I pay professional videographers to go out and film something specific for me. So that's why copyright is important, because there has to be at least some limited time window that somebody can take the time to create something new and be able to reap the benefits from it. But at the same time, it needs to be balanced with the fact that you can't just have the biggest copyright holder owning all the copyrights and nobody can do anything anymore, because there's still benefits to like culture of people taking a popular song or play or movie or whatever and doing something based upon that. I think this is something that's evolving with our online culture in general as to what we decide copyright is acceptable.
So we've already touched on how YouTube expanded copyright tools for creators. However, I think there are some other things we can do too. The first one is sourcing. Adding sources to a video description or through a linked public Google Doc is a great way to add credibility to your video. We've seen it in the past with people who don't agree with the points that we've made in a video, but they still respect us as a channel because we can at least provide sources of where we got that information that led us to that conclusion.
I do think, especially in a time of misinformation, that people can just say things and not base it on anything, that it's really worthwhile to show where you actually got something from. And in general, I think that big creators like Polymatter or Wendover or Real Engineering have been trying to apply these rigorous standards for a longer time. And I think that what you also see now with more recent channels, that smaller creators like Hoog or Into Europe or Money and Macro or your channel.
Creating good quality educational content takes a lot of time and a lot of work. The only way that we're able to manage it here at Faultline on a weekly basis is because we are a team. I present, produce, and edit, whilst Jamie and Aparna research and write the stories. And then we have Vivek and others that help me with the editing, whilst Tim works on creating thumbnails, which we then all collectively give notes on. It's because of this team we're able to have a backlog and routinely put out original and informative content that we're really proud of. From coming together for story pitches to revising the scripts to then filming the videos to then editing them, each video may take weeks to make, but we keep a list of every source used and its corresponding lines in the script. And we hold each other accountable when we're then watching the final versions of the videos and making sure everything is right to go out on YouTube. It's a lot of work, but that's not the only way to keep content plagiarism free.
I think it's really super easy to get access to academic research. If you go to Google Scholar, if you go to JSTOR, in JSTOR you can read 100 articles a month for free online. It brings you so much more wealth than looking at other videos. It gives you really fresh angles. So it gives you the opportunity to be more creative.
What I would say is like appreciate what original content is. Try to get some experience with it yourself on actually filming something yourself and what it's like. Trying to get a particular thing done well on video and the editing process around it, and appreciate that. And do yourself a favor and at least read a little bit about what copyright is, why it exists in the first place, and a little bit about how we got here, because it'll at least help you understand why we're even having to have this discussion.
And I guess OBF, if you are watching this, despite the plagiarism, I think you're a really talented creator. You make some really great animations and you have a way better voiceover than I do. I also appreciate that your recent videos have had sources included, but nobody starts out as a content creator knowing all these things, whether you're OBF or just somebody starting out. These are things that you learn as you start making videos. That's the vulnerability of being a creator online. We all make mistakes and learn from them in a public arena. Our sourcing practices came from Jamie and Aparna's journalistic background. For some context, I started making videos on Snapchat in 2016, just using my phone. I had no concept of even how to use a camera, let alone understanding the intricacies of producing educational content and running a small YouTube channel. And in 6 months' time, I'm certain that we'll look back on something that we did and think, hey, we could have probably done that better. And actually, although we have always added sources to our scripts, it's only been in the past few months that we've decided how useful that they would be to display them in our videos. And that's also a great part of YouTube. It's an outlet for positive and critical feedback. And at the end of the day, just to wrap it back up with OBF, isn't making high quality educational content more important than being known as the plagiarism guy? We reached out to OBF for comment on this video. As of the release, he hasn't responded to us. If he does, we will leave it in a pinned comment below. And if you're new around here, please do consider subscribing to the channel. We release videos here every Thursday about how humanity is understood through geography. In the meantime, you can check out these videos here, and we'll catch up with you in the next one.